Lunar New Year is right around the corner, and I was on the lookout to find the perfect dish for you guys. I stumbled in on this dude doing a cooking demo, and I asked him what he thought.
So what would you say are your top dishes for Chinese New Year?
Yeah, this is a good question. Fish is something you have to serve. The whole fish, not fish fillet, not fish and chips.
So I guess we're going to be doing that. And before you ask, yes, he did sign my book. On today's episode, we're going to be doing a little field trip, do a little grocery shopping, and of course, we're going to learn how to make it fresh at home. Steamed whole fish is a quintessential part of any Chinese New Year celebration. It represents
Fish, ji, means plentiful, abundance. You always serve fish.
And one of the best things about this dish is it might actually be the easiest thing we've ever made on this show. But is it any good? Well, let's go find out. This is Sifu Wong in Sunnyvale. They're famous for their yum cha, aka dim sum, but I'm here tonight for their special dinner menu. They specialize in Cantonese style cooking, so I ordered a couple classics. Dry fried string beans, yes, I know they're originally from Sichuan, but if you haven't had it, the Hong Kong version without the peppercorns is actually really good. It's seasoned with doubanjiang, which is a type of spicy fermented broad bean paste, and it also appears that they made this dish with hand ground pork, which is always nice to see. We also got Mama Chicken's favorite dish, which is the Hong Kong style seafood pan-fried noodles. The seafood and veggies were perfectly cooked and the sauce was silky smooth. I'll definitely have to make both of these dishes sometime for you guys in the future. But this is what we're here for, the whole steamed fish. The fish the waiter chose for us today is black bass, and when you order a fresh fish at any Cantonese restaurant worth its salt, they'll either have a tank in the dining room or in the kitchen to keep these guys alive and swimming. It's served up simply with some aromatics on top and a soy sauce on the bottom of the plate. The fish is perfectly cooked, super tender yet flaky with a nice gelatinous skin. The seasoning is also spot on. The soy sauce is super savory and ever so slightly sweetened. There's a sort of perfume of ginger and scallions which comes from the flash frying of hot oil poured over the toppings. This technique is pretty common throughout China, and the idea is to basically wake up the aromatics with a quick blast of scorching heat, which is going to preserve some of the more ethereal notes that might have been lost with longer cooking. As for when this dish as a whole was developed, it's hard to say. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that steamed fish has probably been around for as long as steamers and fish, which would place the general concept around the Stone Age. Though according to legend, steaming was introduced to the Chinese people during the reign of the mythical Yellow Emperor, who is a pretty interesting character to read about. That said, there's basically no information that I could find on the origins of this dish as we know it, specifically the technique of scorching aromatics with hot oil and then pairing this whole dish with the soy sauce. All in all, this is actually a really good rendition of the classic, but if I had one critique, I'd say that there's just a tad too much oil for my taste. I usually like to see a little bit more soy sauce than oil in the dish, but this is fine as well. The meal is wrapped up with a sweet red bean soup, which is one of the best that I've ever had. It's silky smooth and not too sweet. Overall, this is a really good restaurant, definitely one of the better dim sum places in the Bay if you're looking for something to do on the weekend. Before we get started in the kitchen, let's do a little grocery shopping. I grabbed some ginger, scallions, white pepper, and the soy sauce. You could totally use this pre-made version. It's usually called seafood or seasoned soy sauce, but it's easy enough to make at home. For that, just grab a high quality light soy sauce. This one is really good for this dish. Also grab some rice wine. Shaoxing wine is traditional, but finding a good quality example can be surprisingly difficult. A lot of options here in the States are just shockingly poor quality, weirdly salty, and chemical tasting. If you can find it, go for a good quality Chinese example, or feel free to replace it with a dry sherry. The flavor is remarkably similar to a high-end Shaoxing, or just use a regular, different, high quality rice wine of your choice. Fresh fish is an absolute must for this dish, and the best way to guarantee freshness is to get it live and swimming. The fish of choice for this dish in most restaurants around here in the States is usually some kind of bass. Actually, the traditional choice for the Guangdong region would be carp, which can be rather difficult to find and usually full of bones, so it's kind of hard to eat. Snapper also works great, along with most other mild, white-fleshed fish. If you don't have live fish at your local grocery store, no worries, the pre-dead stuff works great. But there are a few things to note when choosing fish. The Quality Index Method Scheme, or QIM for short, is a popular way to evaluate the freshness of fish. There's quite a bit of literature on the use of QIM to evaluate the storage pattern of many different fish types, but the gist of it is that scientists look for the overall appearance of the skin, eyes, and gills, as well as the physical firmness of the flesh, and of course the odor of the sample. Check for clear eyes, firm flesh, bright and shiny skin, and red gills. Your seafood should not have any strong fishy odor, rather it should have just a mild scent of the ocean. Poor scores in any of these categories are telltale signs that your fish is currently being enjoyed by its resident bacteria and it's on its way out. This largemouth bass is going to be perfect for us. I asked the fishmonger to scale and clean it, which saves us a whole lot of time later on. Speaking of, when you're back in the kitchen, wipe it down and remove the gills if they aren't gone already. This one is fine, so now all we got to do is take a spoon and sort of scrape down the spine of the cavity to get out some blood and excess fat, which can taste a little bit fishy. Trim down the fins a bit and clip down any crazy long fins and spines, and then trim down the tail. To ensure even cooking and the ease of eating later on, we're going to also do a shallow cut down the spine of the fish. Rub it down with a little bit of rice wine to further subdue the funk, and then stuff the cavity with some sliced scallions and ginger. Grab yourself a nice heavy plate that can fit in the steamer, and yes, you will need some way to steam this dish. I've been using a pie pan with holes poked in it for years, but I've recently upgraded to this stack setup, but you do you. I lined the dish with some green onion stalks to sort of elevate the fish a little bit to promote even cooking. Just plop the whole thing into the steamer and then let it go on high for about 5 minutes per pound. While that's going on, let's get the sauce started. It's super duper simple. Just mix some soy sauce, water, and sugar along with a splash of cooking wine and optional white pepper. Stir until homogeneous, and if you want to speed up the rate of dissolution, you can pop it in the microwave for about 30 seconds or so. Taste it and adjust the seasoning as you see fit. Just a tip, a lot of recipes I've tested online tend to go quite overboard with the sugar, almost making like a syrup. The sugar here is to balance the salinity of the sauce, not to make the dish taste sweet, which in my opinion overwhelms the delicate natural sweetness of the fish itself. Speaking of, the fish is nearing completion, and you can tell because it kind of looks like a hot mess. If we waited overnight to cook the fish, it might have been a little bit better, but there's this weird thing that happens in the first hour or two after death where it basically curls up and the skin kind of bursts and the whole thing looks real whack after it's cooked. But overall, yes, that is a good sign that it looks crazy, which means that right now is the perfect time to prep the oil. Just get a little bit of neutral oil in the pan. I'm using avocado oil, and then let that heat up for a bit. While that's going on, you can finally grab your fish, which should be perfectly cooked by now. It spent about 8 minutes in the steamer total for this 2-pound fish. Pour out the juices at the bottom, which can sometimes be kind of bitter and fishy, and then top the fish with your sliced scallion, ginger, and cilantro. When the oil is shimmering and slightly smoking at the edges, it's ready to go. Make sure your workspace is clear because this oil is seriously hot and pretty dangerous. Pour it over the aromatics to help wake them up. You should hear a really loud sizzle and smell a really nice fragrant aroma. Add in some fresh herbs. This would typically be the only time that you added in the cilantro, but I like the flavor of both the scorched and fresh cilantro, so you do you. Pour in your seasoned soy sauce and we're done. How does it taste? Well, the fish is ultra tender and not fishy tasting at all. The aromatic stuffing really helped with that. The sauce is perfect as well, not too sweet or over seasoned, which helps make the freshness of the fish and the toppings shine through. Speaking of, the ginger and scallions, by the way, just have the slightest sweetness from that hot oil bath, which helps round out the whole dish. Once you've eaten one side of the fish, rather than flipping it over, which can be seen as bad luck as it symbolizes a boat capsizing, some families insist on separating and removing the skeleton in one piece to get at the other side. And one more thing, it's actually considered good luck to leave a little bit of fish at the end of the meal as a leftover to symbolize the abundance for the year to come. To maximize this meal, enjoy everything over rice and be sure to spoon over some of that tasty sauce. This dish is crazy delicious and actually quite easy to do at home. Like I said earlier, you don't need to use a live fish for this either as long as you pick out a fresh one. I really hope you guys give it a try. And until next time, thank you so much for watching and I hope you have an awesome day.
Favorite dish is always the dishes that your mom prepared for you and cooked for you when you were a child. You always remember. So clay pot cooking, clay pot rice is always my favorite because my mother prepared that for me many times.